Hello, everybody. Welcome to Audubon Society of Central Arkansas's meeting. Our guest presenters tonight are Michael Linz and Patty McLean, sharing their birding adventure in Australia. Michael started enjoying birds in 2008. He combines his love of photography with his love of birds by taking photos so we can study the birds closer and get better at identifying them. In 2014, he retired from the business world and went to work as a full-time birder. Patty McLean retired from the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta in 2013, where she was the senior advisor to the director of the Office on Smoking and Health. She has recently returned to Arkansas and is continuing her passion for birding and traveling. She lived in Georgia for a long time. Her Georgia list is rather extensive, but she is definitely working to build her Arkansas list alongside Michael. And with that, Michael and Patty, take us on an adventure in Australia.
Good day, mates.
Good day.
So this is a little odd, as Dan said. He had asked us to do this right after we returned from Australia back in October. And so it's a little bit new for me, and I think for Patty as well, speaking into a computer and looking at little pictures off on the side. So maybe a little odd at times as we try to go through this. As Dan mentioned, I'm a photographer. So mostly what you'll be seeing is the photos of the birds that we took while we were in Australia, and a little bit of commentary on what we saw while we were there. So we will begin from there. Patty, you have anything to say?
I just am excited to be part of this and to go back through the photos. We've been going through them again and again and again over the last couple of days and picked out some that I think you'll enjoy, and starting with this beautiful picture of the Sydney Opera House, famous Sydney Opera House. Perfect day. And I want to mention too, you'll see in some of the photographs pictures of Karen Holiday. She joined us there as well. So it was really a lot of fun to have another Arkansan along with us, with some friends from Florida and a lady from Delaware. So.
And Karen, we see you're on
Yes.
the presentation, so don't correct us while we're going through.
You can correct us later.
So enough. What we did was we started looking at Australia, and about what I knew about Australia when we started was what I'd seen on Crocodile Dundee and some of the other shows on TV. And so knew it was a little tiny island continent, and that we should go down there and check it out. And then I got to looking at it, and I realized the little tiny island was just about the same size as the US. So we decided maybe if this thing was that big, we needed to look at narrowing down a trip to there. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to turn on a laser pointer. I'll use green where everybody will be familiar with it as the green birds. And what we decided that maybe we could cover is just the East Coast, all the way down. And so we planned our trip around just doing the East Coast. And that tiny little bit being about 900 miles of travel.
About the distance from Maine to Florida.
So a major trip. And so what we did is we had worked through a birding company out of Minnesota, and we laid out this as our itinerary. And so these are the key places that I'm going to go through as we move through this. And basically we will work out of Sydney. We flew into Sydney and we hit several areas there. Then we moved up to the far northeast part of Australia and birded there for a few days. And then we moved further south into the central region, and then to the southeastern region back just around Sydney again, and then all the way down to Tasmania. And so I broke this up into those 5 areas. So a few key points about our trip is what we did is we figured we needed someone to guide us, that we did not want to make a trip this major on our own. And so we worked with a company called Netscape Tours, that Naturescape, not Netscape, but Naturescape Tours. And Kim, who runs that and owns that company, set up a personal trip with us. Kim is a personal friend of Patty's, and I had worked with him a little bit. I know Karen has made trips with him in the past as well. And so Kim set up the trip for us, doing all that legwork. If you're going to make a major trip like this, I advise very heavily to use a company such as Kim's company with a leader that understands the area that he's going to, and let him set up all of that around it. So, and then as far as local guides, he also can contact local guides as needed and move those in. We personally like very small groups. We try to stay at about 6 to 8 people, and anything bigger than that, we find that not everybody gets to see the birds, and we walk all over each other and somebody's not happy at the end of the day. So in this trip, we went with 6. We actually got Karen, as Patty mentioned, to be participant number 6 to fill out our group. If you make trips, what we tend to do is buy a field guide. I tend to like hard copies. The book that we bought was Pizzy. And you'll also have to keep in mind that I never get any of the words right, any of you that know me, and I'll probably call 90% of the birds wrong. Patty will kick me in under the table and tell me I said it wrong. So we'll get it all right. At any rate, I also like to get the phone version of the field guides. They're a lot easier to carry in the field than a big heavy book. On this particular trip, I utilized Merlin, the phone version of it as well. If you've used Merlin in the US, it has a very nice extension for Australia, and it does the same type things there. So it can help identify the birds. I find that it gets probably maybe 60% of them right, about like it does in the US, but it gets about 90% of the families right, and it kind of sends you the right direction to start looking for birds and to do the identification of those. So a very, very handy tool. The length of the trip, we figured a 900-mile trip, about 5 weeks worth. So what transportation-wise, we figured we'd have to use planes, vans, and some hiking boots. Basically, the major areas that I discussed at the front, we use planes to transfer between those. And then internally in each of those areas, we used a van. The vans that we use have enough seats in them that everybody gets a window seat, so that you can actually see birds as you drive, and not everybody is saying, well, I was in the middle, I couldn't see anything. So I recommend a large van, large enough to hold your group with windows for everyone. And then we did a little bit of hiking to get around here. So the weather, as we pointed out, this is about the same as going from Maine to Florida. And the temperatures for us range from 28 to 90 degrees. So if you plan on making a trip, keep in mind that the difference between the weather between the northern part and the southern part is about the same as the northern part of the U.S. and the southern part of the U.S. So be prepared to carry clothes for cold weather and warm weather. So great thing about Australia in this trip was they almost spoke English. They had a few phrases that were a little unique, and I think a lot of us has heard those over the years. One that I really enjoyed that they had, they would say, "Good on you," and I thought that was the coolest saying. So I hope you guys at the end of this thing can tell Patty, "Good on you." What "good on you" means is, great job, guys. We really enjoyed that. You appreciate it. So the nourishment, food and drink in Australia. So the food is excellent, but you need to take a salt shaker. So they do not salt their food. So if you are a person who doesn't do salt, you'll be happy. But you should eat seafood. Seafood is what they do, and it is excellent. As far as drinking, if you're a beer drinker, forget it. It's they do not make beer.
Well, they make it, but
yeah, you can't drink it. So at any rate, maybe some of their wines.
Their wines yes.
Were pretty good. I think between Karen and Patty and I, there's probably not a brand of wine that we did not try while we were there. So great trip, lots of great food, and lots of great drinks, and lots of birds. So speaking of birds, there are 828 species in Australia. Now that's the whole of Australia, not just the East Coast that we did. The endemics there are about 45%, which brings you to 372 endemics. The non-birds, we saw lots of things that were not birds. I personally don't know many of them's names, and I could not count them. There was a bunch of them. So we won't cover their numbers too much there. Our numbers within the area, the 3 states within the continent of Australia that we hit were Queensland, and we saw 275 species. And New South Wales, we saw 188. In Tasmania, we saw 105 species, with a total species for our group of 384. Then for life birds, we were sitting at 358 life birds for this trip. Kim got sick in the middle of the trip and did not create some of the lists for the end of the trip. So those numbers may actually go up, but you can expect to see around 400 species in a 5-week trip. So we got ready and we made our trip. We left from home, flew to Sydney by way of Houston.
Nonstop.
And it's about a 22, 23 hour trip. It is major. The trip from Houston was nonstop and was a little over 17 hours on a plane. So when we got to Sydney, our airport, we had decided we would stay in Sydney for a few days just to get reacclimated to the new time change, which is a day different, and to the long flight on the plane. So do a little touristing and maybe a tiny little bit of birding. And so this is the area in the map that we went to, marked in red. The areas that we birded were the airport, the Sydney Harbor, Centennial Olympic Park, and Royal Botanical Gardens. If anybody has questions about the locations and what have you, they can contact us offline, and we'll give you more information on each of those. So in the airport, of course, we got off the plane looking for birds, and the first bird we saw was an Australian white ibis. So this was our first life bird of the trip. Something key in the name of this bird is Australian. Australian in the name means that's an Australian endemic. Some of the birds that we saw there had the name Australasian, which means in the area of Australia, which would include like New Guinea, New Zealand, all of those areas. So a little wider area. So we got out, we did some touristing. Of course, you got to check out the Opera House, and we did a little looking at that. We checked out around the harbor, beautiful modern city, lots of historical stuff in the area as well. Beautiful skyline at night. This crazy looking bridge, and our guide offered to take us up on the bridge. He said we could make the trip, and it was about $200 for the trip. As you can see, there are people walking along the edge of this bridge, and we decided there probably weren't any birds up there that we wanted to see, and we didn't want to pay $200 to make a walk up a bridge, so we passed on that particular one. And very quickly, we moved into birding mode, and here's our group on the harbor looking for birds right away. And we found them. And there's Karen, the birds found her as well. We had birds landing all over us, and just hundreds of birds in this small part of water in a little park that was close to the hotel. Then we went looking for animals. We found this guy right away. And
our one and only koala.
Unfortunately, the only koala we saw. So not that great. But the next bird that we saw was a welcome swallow. So appropriately named, this bird welcomed us to Australia. He followed us the entire trip and welcomed us at every location. So one of the most common birds that we had looks very, very similar to our barn swallow. So a nice bird, and also an endemic. Silver gull is one of the gulls most often seen in the area. We saw it in most locations. Most of these birds we saw in Sydney were things that we saw about everywhere we went. This guy, although he was very strange looking to us, is a masked lapwing, and this is it and one of its chicks. And we saw those in numerous locations from the northern part to the southern part of the country. The Australian magpie, another frequent bird. Willie Wagtail, our favorite. We saw him every day, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think we missed a day of not seeing Willie Wagtail. So one of our favorites.
It was a very charismatic bird and very charming. So we were actually making an effort to look for it every day because he was so cute. Because they wag their tail.
He is definitely
very charming. Okay, sorry.
So then the rainbow lorikeet, this all over Australia, you see different parrots, parakeets, lorikeets, and so you'll see a few of those in the presentation. We are not going to cover all the birds. Patty said she thought I may have tried to put a picture of every one of them in the presentation. So
maybe half.
We may have half of them, but I said I'm a photographer. So rainbow lorikeet, a very colorful one, and seen a lot. Magpie lark, a strutting bird, and very, very handsome. This is a channel-billed cuckoo, one of the surprise birds that we saw as we were leaving the park on our first day in Sydney. And one of the birds that they said in a lot of trips they don't see at all. And I think we saw probably a half a dozen or better of them. So,
and it flew in right over our heads, a huge cuckoo.
Yeah. And he's one of those that none of the other birds like. So, of course, he was being attacked by everybody, which led us to find him. So while I was taking pictures of him, some local birders walked up and said, "Oh, have you seen the frogmouth?" And we said, "No." And they said, "Oh, and have you seen the powerful owl?" And we said, "No." And they gave us directions, as birders often do, and help each other out. So Tony Frogmouth, a very difficult bird to see. So we'll put the green on him. There's his eye, so everybody can figure him out. And then here he is again, and there's his eye, and here are the bristles, and here is the bill. These things have a very wide mouth, and that's why they call them frog mouth.
It's all the way to here.
So his mouth goes all the way across his face, and kind of a neat bird to see, not one that you get to see often because they're well hidden. The next bird was the powerful owl that the locals had directed us to, and we got great looks at it. The rest of the group had ran off and left us, which is not uncommon because I stand around taking pictures and they get restless and leave. So the next day we went back and got even better looks at this bird. This was at dusk that we saw him. He is one of the birds that people travel from all over the world basically to see in Australia. So pretty cool, endemic to find. Then,
beautiful.
Now we're going for some pretty guys. This was a crested pigeon. This is a great butcher bird, named butcher bird, just for like our butcher bird, for the same reason, hang stuff on spikes, any kind he can find. This is a galah, which is another one of the types of parrots that they have, and very, very colorful, a very, very nice color.
Very beautiful. And another beauty.
One of my favorites is the black swan. They are not like ones that we see here where people have bought them and put them on their little ponds. These are native species.
Wild.
And then one of the birds that Australia is famous for, the laughing kookaburra. And so they were everywhere and laughed at us the whole time we were there. So another great bird.
Funny.
So, as I said, great food, do the seafood. And the first day we did supper and we had seafood, and shrimp was one of our favorites. But we were a little surprised to find a sign that said, "Do not feed the birds." And the bird on the sign wasn't like a crow or, and it was an ibis. And it actually was the ibis that we got as our first bird. So like I said,
and that's really him standing there. Michael didn't superimpose anything.
Yeah.
That's the actual photograph. We thought that was kind of funny.
He's standing on the table. He can't read the sign, just like the crows here don't read them. And he's eating off of people's plates. So one man's life bird is another man's trash bird. So Queensland, we moved quickly to there. Hit several areas, cans, even though it looks like cards. At Eddy Bay, Daintree, and Kingfisher. Kingfisher probably being one of the more famous places in the area. So we ate again, ate great food, a little bit of avocado toast and eggs. Patty says that's the best thing you can eat anywhere. And after breakfast, we headed to Cairns. So being a country boy, they said we were going to the Esplanade. Of course, I had to Google it. And so what it was is it's a long, open, level area, typically beside the sea. And this is a picture of it. As you can see, there's a boardwalk runs along it and runs the length of it for miles and miles. But a great area. And this water recedes.
It's tidal.
Yes, it's a tidal area. And it recedes usually in the evening if you've got your plan right. And we went there to see shorebirds. And we saw quite a few different shorebirds, as there were large ones, small ones, what have you. Some of our favorites were the black-fronted dotterel, the carrot sandpiper, which was one that I had not seen anywhere and was very excited to see. And then a beach stone curlew, which even the guide was excited. I think this was a life bird for him. So beautiful birds and lots of beach birds. Along the trees along there are these rose-crowned fruit doves, which were another one of our target species, were the fruit doves, and we got to see several of those, and we got pretty good looks at this one. Rose-crowned, as you can see, with a rose crown. Pretty enough that I had to put 2 pictures of it. Then the mistletoe bird, another beauty, and the Australasian pied oyster catcher. And I think he was trying to tell us that we had scored a touchdown on this trip to the Esplanade. So a great place to visit if you're into shorebirds. Then we moved into other areas. Of course, the common myna is everywhere, eating everybody's scraps. Here he's eating somebody's bread. The rainbow bee eater we saw in one of the cemeteries. Forest kingfisher, straw-neck ibis, the brush stone curlew, bush, not a brush. Told you Patty would correct me.
Well, sorry.
And little kingfisher, and I love kingfishers. This was one of my favorite birds over there.
Tiny little thing.
He is tiny, tiny, tiny for a kingfisher, and just so iridescent and blue. Just a beautiful, beautiful bird. Then this is an olive-backed sunbird. It's the only sunbird that they have in Australia. They have lots of honey eaters, yes, but this is the only sunbird. A very blue-black iridescent throat on the male here. Then this is their equivalent of a turkey, an Australian brush turkey. These guys are hilarious. We had pictures of one that was just laying there looking like he was dead on the ground and playing possum. So but so much more colorful than our little turkey. So, and a lot smaller than our turkey as well. Then this is
only a mother could love.
Yes, only a mother could love these guys. There are about, I think there were 3, maybe 4 different firebirds that we saw. They're also considered, I think, part of the honey eaters. Most of them have red eyes, and they have a big hump on their bill on some of them. But he is actually eating that flower. So just like a hummingbird would eat it. Very unusual to see a large bird like that on the flowers. Then we had a target species of a cassowary, one of the most famous birds in Australia, one of the biggest birds in the world. Things are around 100 pounds, over 5 foot tall, known to kill people. So be a little aggressive and a little scary to look for. But our guide told us that all the locations that he had located, they were unable to find them. And so we were a little disappointed, but he woke us up the next day and he said, I found a place that may work. And he took us to a place called Eddy Bay, and we found a cassowary. This guy was in a campground, and they said he came there every year and wandered around the campground, and they just gave him space when he asked for space, and they lived with him as he is there. So we got great looks at this guy. The helmet on this guy is made out of bone. It is a very hard substance. And you can see the back and the neck, very colorful and kind of textured. So nice, good look, looking at his wattles, and another good look looking at us like, I've had enough of the picture taking, time to go. So we felt great that we had seen one, and we got a great look at his killing devices, those huge feet, and it was kind of scary looking to see those. But as we left the park a mile or 2 down the road, we saw another cassowary. So we saw 2 for the trip.
That day.
Then we went to another park, and there was a sign that said cassowary. And the local guide says, I've been coming to this park for years. I've never seen a cassowary. We got out of the van, turned around, back by the sign, another cassowary. This one was in the woods by the time we got to check him out. And he was looking at us rather aggressively here, and I decided time to move on. We finished up our area in the Cairns area and moved to the next area, which was Daintree. The Daintree is mainly the river and an area that we covered there. This is a couple of shots of it. As you can see, quite a few mountains and a very nice river. And we took a boat trip down this, and we saw whistling kites, more kingfishers, a different kite. This is the azure kingfisher, a very nice one. We kind of blew this guy off and then found out that most people don't get to see him. He's a great-billed heron. Looks a lot like our great blue, and was very excited about something. May have been this crocodile. We saw several crocodiles in this area. The Brahminy kite is eating a fish above us here. He's a fish eater. Spectacled monarchs, shining flycatchers. The little bronze cuckoo, there are several bronze cuckoo. This was the smaller of the ones, and the first one that we saw. And another frogmouth. You can see his face a little bigger, and can see that huge mouth and why they call it a frogmouth. Another great bird to see. They usually are hidden and difficult to find, but with a good guide, they can help get you on these. Their cormorants are a little prettier than ours. They had a lot of different species. This is one of the prettier ones as far as I was concerned, and it's a little pied cormorant. Very thriller. Thriller. He was a thriller for me, but a very nice bird and a very nice song. This guy was a metallic starling. I have to say that they're a little better than our starlings, We had hundreds of them in this one tree in the nest that you see on either side of this bird, and a very, very nice bird, pointer green.
That's part of a nest.
And another big target that we had laid out was we wanted to see bowerbirds. And I was not real familiar with bowerbirds. These were my first bowerbirds ever. As a matter of fact, this great bowerbird was my very first. And so the bowerbird actually builds a bower with a court in front of it to court his girlfriends. And this guy, you can't see it very well, but on the back of his neck, there's a little bit of pink and red up here. And this is trash that he has picked up and put in his court, and his color is pink. So everything that he puts in his court is pink or red. This is what it looks like. So this is what his bower looks like. And he walks through that kind of a nest looking deal to get through to the courtyard where he courts his girlfriends. This is a bower for a different bird, a golden bower. And this stick that runs vertically across here is what it sits on. It does not have that enclosure, and its stuff is just leaves that it throws out. We didn't see a bird in this one, but we heard it. Honey eaters, hundreds of them. White-cheeked honey eater, the rufous whistler, and Willie dancing for us as usual.
Wagging his tail.
Then we moved to Kingfisher Park in the tablelands. This is a rainforest area in areas, and then also on the flats of it, there's farming area. This is us, and like I said, a big van, and you can see we've made a stop here and checking for field birds. This particular tree is in front of the lodge. The lodge here is not a fancy place, but it has a lot of feeders, and it has places to sit and see birds and walking trails in the property itself. This bird, or this particular tree, is like 10, 15 feet from the deck on the building. And I think we had 20 plus species in this tree alone. This was our guide. Just a good old Southern boy living in Minnesota. As you can see, he's a good redneck. And let me take the picture anyway. Group here as we birded one of the local area schools. A curtain fig. This tree is very unusual in the way that it's formed, and all those roots that are hanging down. This thing is probably 30 feet high. Well, maybe 100. So at any rate, I thought it kind of neat that it forms by little plants rooting up in the top of it. Eventually, because of the high humidity and what have you, and the nutrients, this thing roots, and it just forms little trees roots all along it, and they choke the tree like a lot of vines that we would choke out a tree. That tree then falls into the tree next to it, and the roots continue to grow and try to go back to the ground, and then it makes this huge curtain, which was pretty neat to see. White-necked heron, plumed whistling duck. One of my favorites as far as the honey eaters is the scarlet, and they call this one a Mazamela instead of a honey eater, and he was very red. The grebe there, great crested grebe, a great crown on this guy, and one of the most beautiful birds we saw while we were there. Then their little grebe, which is kind of like our pie-billed. Their Saurus crane, which is one of the ones that is similar to the cranes that we get here. We saw a lot of rails while we were there. This is the white-browed crake. While we were checking this guy out, we also saw the spotless crake. This was one that the eBird guys wanted additional documentation because they said we should not be seen yet. And so we did have a great shot of it here, a very, very beautiful rail. And then just like anywhere you go here in the U.S., you can find a lot of birds together, and including some good chickens. white-throated tree creeper. This guy is a spotted catbird. We'll get him the next time around, but we want you to hear what he sounds like. He is a very unique sounding bird and very easy to hear, very, very loud, but difficult to find. He hides well in the green, and
I can imitate it. It goes, it's just crazy. It's crazy sounding.
Somebody has been on my phone and it's moved away.
He's been on his phone, not me.
So it's now showing sulfur. We made a night trip out looking for owls, found an eastern barn owl, sacred kingfisher, the third kingfisher that we've seen, fourth, fantail cuckoo, spotted pardalote, several pardalotes that we saw. These guys are another one of the favorites that I had. One of the honey eaters, this is a Herberton honey eater. It's called by some. He's guessed to be a hybrid between a yellow-tinted and a fuscus. He's not been accepted as a species unto itself, but he's named for Herberton, which is the area that he's in. Can be identified by the fact that he has the black and the yellow on the face. Gray-headed robin, and they're robins. They have lots of them, and they do not look anything like our robins. This is the gray-headed on the nest. This is another honey eater, very chestnut-breasted manakin or munya, depending on which you want to call him. One of their doves, again, they have lots of doves and very colorful. Silver eye, which is a very nice bird to spot because of that white eye. It just kind of shines out at you in the light. This McLean's honey eater is pretty unique to find as well. Another bird that we like, another fruit dove, and it's you can hear Patty imitating him. That's what he sounded like, and you heard it in
That's
the
only way you could find it too. They are hidden in those trees.
Hidden and difficult to see. So the scrub fowl, this is the only scrub fowl that they had and he's orange-footed scrub fowl. Another crate that we saw, another one that is unusual to get to see. This was at the feeders. He comes in at night to take a bath, and we happened to get a shot of him, and most people don't ever get to see him as well. The other one that's a little difficult at this area to find is the noisy pitta, and we were fortunate enough to get to see him as the sun came up in the morning. Then the riflebird. This is the only one that we got to see, and he almost displayed for us. This is one of the paradise, birds of paradise, and he approached getting the wings up in the arc, but this is about as close as he got.
For us.
This is a chowchilla, digs in around in the dirt in the woods, and tough to see, let alone get a shot of. Pied monarch, a pale yellow robin, another one of their robins, again, not like ours. Yellow-breasted boatbill. This his bill is about maybe 3/4 of an inch wide. One of the cockatoos that we saw, this is a red-tailed black cockatoo. One of my favorites here was the bustard. This is what the guy looked like wandering around in the field. And then he blew himself up, dancing in a circle, showing out. And then he blew that out until it was all gone, making a kind of a whooshing sound, calling in the girls. Yeah. So
can't duplicate that one.
This is one of the sparrow type birds that they have, a golden headed cisticula. Didn't want to come out. It was sticking. Fairy wrens, another bird that was on our top of our list, and they have about a half a dozen different species of them. This is a redback fairy wren. The lovely fairy wren, another one of the species. Another honey eater, the blue-faced. The apostle bird, and I don't know why he looked so mean, but he did. This is another of the kookaburras that they have. This is the blue wing. and then time to move south again. As we move south, we're flying by plane to get there. So Hervey Bay, Lady Elliot, O'Reilly's. So we started by having some of the bad beer, but it was good enough to prepare for the plane ride over to Lady Elliot, which Lady Elliot is part of the Great Barrier Reef. You can see our group packed in here like sardines, and some of us are a little claustrophobic. This is the island, and all it is basically a few buildings and an airstrip in the middle of it, and it's on this barrier reef. We went out on a small boat with a group and did a little snorkeling. I did see a few things, turtles and what have you. And then we walked around in the area. This is some of the dead part of the island. A plane that we flew in, and the group outside of there. The black noddy was nesting all over the island. The buff-banded rail, we saw a few of those, again, common enough that they were under the tables in the cafeteria. Greater and lesser frigate birds, great crested terns, even got to see a few house sparrows. Bridal terns were nesting there. As you can see, there's an egg in front of the tern. Red-tailed tropic birds were flying over, as well as nesting. You can see it here with one of its chicks. This is the brown noddy. The brown noddies were not nesting in the bushes. They're nesting in the grasses and scruff near the ocean. Quite a few of those as well. Turnstones, which we see here, the same one. And the shores were just filled with different terns. We looked pretty hard and found a rosette tern in that mix. You can see his bill and the pink on him. Moved to O'Reilly's. This is the area around O'Reilly's, as you can see.
First National Forest.
It is a very, very mountainous area. It is also a very thick rainforest. What they call, I think they call them dry rainforest, but this is a swinging bridge. It's probably maybe 50 feet up into the canopy that we walked across birding. One of the targets here was the king parrot, and we saw them and they saw us. They landed on our heads, male on me, female on Patty as appropriate, and they landed and danced on our heads for us. Matter of fact, a lot of the birds were very friendly at O'Reilly's, and we saw quite a few there. The noisy friarbird, another one of the friars, one of their crow, Torreson crow, mangrove honeyeater, pied currawong. This was a cotton pygmy goose, very, very pretty guy, very tiny, not much bigger than And then striped honeyeater, olive-backed oriole, black-fronted dotterel, a red-kneed one, and kind of a difference in the size. One was a big bird, one was a little tiny guy. Whistlers, a rufous female. This is another one, the bronze cuckoo, horsefell, crimson rosella, the eastern yellow robin, and regent bowerbird, another one of the bowerbirds, one of the more colorful ones. These guys were eating off of our deck at the cabin. Lyrebirds, they were not friendly. We got to see this guy. Really could not get a great picture of him, but was very happy to see him. This is the Albert's lyrebird. Eastern whip, this is another one of the birds that was heard more than seen and has a very, very nice song. One of our favorites, mainly because of his song. Bower, again, wonder who. And it's this guy. And
look at those eyes.
He has blue eyes, and so he put blue stuff in his playground. This particular one, our guide actually moved something in the bower to show us how he would react. And this is him coming through and seeing that his area did not look right. And immediately he started picking his stuff up and moved everything back to where it was supposed to, looked around to see who moved it, and then moved up to a perch to say, I'm back in control. Everything's where it should be. One of the most beautiful black birds I've ever seen. This is his son, which is a satin bowerbird, a wonga pigeon, superb fairy wren, and his girlfriend, the white-browed scrub wren, and the yellow-throated scrub wren, the green catbird, which is very similar. It'll have to do with Patty screaming. The glossy black cockatoo, varied Satella. And Dan, we moved back to Sydney at this point, but I'm showing that my 45 minutes is up.
You can have a few more minutes. We didn't start with your part exactly at 7 o'clock.
Okay. All right. Good deal, because I'm talking fast. So at Sydney, our first place to hit was Tasman Sea on a pelagic, the Royal National Park, Blue Mountain, and Capertee Valley. We started out on our pelagic trip. I don't do pelagics well. I'll give you a hint. It looked pretty good here. We were like floating around, little boats on the side of us.
That's not us in the water.
We had a little bigger boat than that, but very nice. And then
Good thing.
10 minutes later, this is what it looked like, or it seemed like to me. So didn't see a lot of different species on the trip, a very rough trip. If you do not do pelagics well, I would not recommend this one. It's the worst thing I have been on. This is a wedge-tailed shearwater. Their gannet that they have, and one of the albatrosses we saw, they call this one a shy albatross, and then the wandering albatross that was landing just a few feet from the boat. On to the national park.
We survived it.
Royal National Park, barely. But this is Royal National Park, a few shots from there. Beautiful scenery. The Capertee Valley, as you can see out here. In the valley is some more. This is part of the flat tablelands, and you can see it's tabletops. The road back here, you can see were the types of roads we were driving, and this is what happens to your vehicle when you drive those. Kim took it all in stride, fixed the flat while the rest of us birded, and we got on the road again. You made a quick trip by this church.
Said a prayer.
Say a prayer too, and got back on the road. It worked. We got a nice rainbow and moved on. The people in this area are very artistic. One of the local artists wanted to beautify her city and did so with these birdhouses and has put these on the wall for decoration. We also hit one of a small trail, one of the Charles Darwin Trail, and visited it briefly. Another one of our favorites was striated pardalote, and then zebra finches, which meant something special to me because my dad raised zebra finches when I was young. The Regent honey eater is one that is listed as endangered, and we were fortunate enough to find one of those and a couple of shots of him. Spiny-cheeked honey eater, dusky wood swallow, turquoise parrot, which is another one that most people don't get to see, and we got lucky and found this guy. Red rump parrot, white-browed babbler, yellow thornbill, bluebill duck. One of my favorite ducks, a pink-eared duck, kind of looked like a zebra on a duck's body. So very, very nice. The bill is very, very unusual, like a shoveler-looking bill. Yellow rump thornbill, Australian reed warbler, superb lyrebird. Again, we did not get great looks, so I got a nice look at his butt. So rufous fantail had a nice butt, so I enjoyed that one too. The brown tree creeper, leaden flycatcher, the top-notch pigeon. We would see these fly over. This was probably one of the few that we actually saw somewhere. It's kind of like an old man clown-looking pigeon to me. The dollar bird, and he didn't leave us any dollars, but we did get a look. Another spotted pardalote. New Holland honey eater, one of the prettiest ones. Eastern spinebill, yellow tufted honey eater. Another robin, quite different. White plumed honey eater. The white winged chough, the wood swallow, masculine, and a white-browed, diamond firetail, Jackie Winter, very plain bird, southern whiteface. These are mailboxes, so everybody gets to do whatever they want to with their mailbox. And this is a close-up of them. You can see they pull a little slot at the top, a little handle at the bottom, and this kind of stuff they put on top of it. We left from there and went to Tasmania, which was our favorite area, and visited several areas there. The airport, you had to fly into Tasmania. They still believe that they have a Tasmanian tiger there, and they actually put it on their license plate. This is one of the nice lakes that we went to. You can see there's still snow up in the mountains. It was quite cool here. We're all wearing heavy coats. More of the lake, some waterfalls in the area. Trees are what was left of them at the time we were there. These fires we started seeing as we left. You can see a helicopter in the background actually dropping water. So some of the breakwaters along the ocean, another nice view of some of the mountains in Tasmania and the open fields there. This is the ocean side, some of the beach area in Tasmania, and lots of very touristy area and lots of people that visit this area. The only way to get to the southernmost part of it, our trip, was Bruny Island, a small island that is part of Tasmania. And the only way to get there was by ferry. Captain Cook got there by boat. We did a little jumping to jump through hoops to see some of the things we saw. Again, wonderful food. I didn't eat this one. I don't remember who did, but it sure looked good. Some of the ducks, chestnut teal, another rail, Lewin's rail, some of their spoonbills, swans, common blackbird. This is something that came from Europe that somebody brought in because he thought their birds didn't sing well enough. A scarlet robin. This is a Tasmanian endemic scrub wren. A gray fantail, brown thornbill, a European goldfinch, which came in from Europe. Scrub tit. This is one of the brown falcons, gray currawong. Pink robin, who was watching me do the jumping and learned how to do it. Tasmanian native hen, which is one of their endemics. Banded lapwing and a chick. Musk duck, and this thing on its neck is part of the duck. It's not like something he's got in his mask. It's just a kind of a pouch that is on the front of it. Very funny looking duck. Skylark, a Eurasian skylark. Crescent honeyeater. Kelp gill, which is about the size of the great blackback. The yellow-throated honeyeater. Black-headed honeyeater, a golden whistler. Yellow wattle bird, and that's because of the wattles on the side of his head. Wattles are actually red, not yellow, but there is a red wattle bird as well. The dusky robin, another one of the robins, a little more plain. Wedge-tail eagle, so one of the eagles that are local, kind of displaying a little bit for us, a big guy. Flame robin, which is one of my favorites in the robin family that they had. Beautiful firetail, another very, very colorful bird. The New Holland honeyeater was, again, one of my favorites. They had oyster catchers that look like ours, but are not the same. They also have a sooty oyster catcher. Then they have this gull that is local to them. Here's one coming in, letting everybody know that he owns the beach. And then just kind of looking sweet and innocent. But if you look at that huge bill, you know he is not sweet and innocent. And this is a Pacific gull and has probably the largest bill of any gull I've ever seen.
Puffin style.
And then hooded plover, and a sign that I found very nice that a young man had put up for this plover that says they're harmless, but they're we run a risk of them disappearing forever if we don't do our part to fix the environment. White-fronted chat, another of the cockatoos, a bassin thrush, This is a bird that we had to go to a restricted part. We stayed in Inala, called a 40 spotted paralote. It's the only place they are. They are very endangered, and about the only place you can see them is from this restricted access location. And we saw a couple. This is a green rosella from there, a brush bronzewing. So, Dan, that is all the birds that I have, but I can buzz through these wildlife pictures in about 5 minutes.
Sure. We're having fun. Let's do it.
Okay.
Good.
Wildlife.
And we did see the little penguin when we were there, but photographs were
We
impossible.
didn't get a picture of the penguin other than that one on the sign. These guys weren't too wild, but they were pretty endemic to the area.
They just don't know how to cook lamb over there.
You don't want to eat it when they cook it. It doesn't taste good. Eat the seafood. Then we saw a couple of bats. These are flying foxes.
Coronavirus carriers.
Yeah, these did not have any coronavirus. Spectacled on the left and gray-headed on the right. A couple of the local clams, which did make me hungry. The clams. Okay. This is a mud spitting fish. It was very unusual to watch. A few of the kangaroos, and I thought there were only one kangaroo, and what we found is there's a lot of kangaroos, and every one of them are a little different. The first ones we saw were in the standard pose that I'm used to seeing them in wrestling. This is one with a baby. A couple of different ones here. I'm not going to bother with their names because I don't know them. This was a rock wallaby and her baby in the pouch looking out at us. We actually petted these guys, and they were in an area where they were managed. This I didn't even know existed. Is a tree kangaroo. And so this kangaroo is living up in a tree with its baby. This is a wallaby, a redneck wallaby. Another one of the kangaroos. I don't know what this lop-eared one was. He just looked strange enough. I should put him in there. A couple of reptiles that we saw was we got a close-up of this one small snake.
He wasn't that small.
About maybe
about
7 feet long.
Apparently one of the most venomous in the world.
Yep, this is a brown snake. So you gotta keep your eye open for snakes while you're there and other things. Saw a few turtles, frogs, lizards, and big lizards. So this big monitor is probably about, maybe 6 foot long. Yeah. And then one of the guys that we also wanted to see in the mammal range was the platypus. These guys are hard to find, hard to see, and even harder to get a picture of because they only come up for a couple of seconds. But very, very unique animal and very, very fun to see. And we saw a few. Wombat.
Wombat, sure.
So I'm trying to figure out how difficult it would be to pass square poop, but this guy does. He marks his territory by dropping a square one on top of a log, and that way it doesn't roll off. But this is the little guy that does it.
So cute.
And he is a very cute guy, even if he does poop squares.
That's right. This
is a green ringtail possum. About everything we saw were possums. The one on the left is a sugar glider. The one on the right is not a skunk. It is a striped possum. And a couple of rats that we saw. Not in our hotel rooms, but we did see these in the woods. We went to a place that we stayed, and they actually put out chicken wings, raw chicken meat, to try to attract different animals in, including Tasmanian devils. We first saw this guy, we thought maybe that's one, but he's not. He got close enough we can see him. This is all in the dark. They start, you stay up till midnight, 1 o'clock looking for them. But they come in and eat the raw chicken wings they throw out. Here's a guy eating those. These pictures were taken with the porch light, a small porch light, like a 40-watt bulb. This is another one of the possums that came in. The Tasmanian devil, I got a quick look at him, but we moved a bit too soon and he ran away. Karen got great looks at him from her cabin further up the hill. And so we'll have to leave him for another trip to get better pictures. This is our buddy again. You can see him at the top of the pole, the welcome swallow. And he is directing us back home to North America. Go that way. He'd seen enough of us and escorted us long enough.
Okay.
So
with that,
Dan, I've had enough.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Michael and Patty. Any questions for them? If you have a question, please put it in the chat box.
Like your owl.
Any questions?
They all fell asleep, Dan.
No, you're too amusing for that. Well, okay then. So then I guess we will move on. We're going to move on to the business meeting for ASCA. Everyone is welcome to stay for that, or you can sign off. And I'm going to...
John, tell John we saw lots of raptors. It's just that I did not put a lot of the raptor pictures in the presentation. So there are plenty there.
lots every day.
It was awesome.